Hey everybody, this is the third and final video for Unit 4, Islam in the Arab Empire, and we left off in the last video with the Umayyads and the kind of first dynastic group of leaders that ruled that were from Syria. They moved the capital of the Arab Empire from Medina to Damascus. And again, it started with Muawiyah, and he makes the caliphate hereditary. Well, also before we get started, don't forget again, you online kids, to watch the crash course video over Islam, especially before you take your formative today, Tuesday, November 10th, because it's a good review and it'll help you out. But after the Umayyad dynasty goes away, and it's essentially because they were a little elitist. Anybody that was non-Arab, so you have Muslims all throughout the empire, obviously, but not everyone is ethnically Arab. They may be religiously Muslim, but they are not ethnically Arab. And the Umayyads were pretty discriminatory against those that were non-Arab Muslims. So if you were, prime example, like an Algerian Muslim or a Moroccan Muslim, which I know these are modern day places in North Africa. And so nationally that didn't exist yet, but just trying to give you a frame of reference on the region, if you weren't ethnically Arab, then you were discriminated against pretty good. And that got old, especially again, when that empire started growing and getting bigger and encompassing more and more people. They got tired of the discrimination and wanted a more inclusive dynasty to rule. Enter the Abbasids. Okay, so the Abbasid dynasty is going to come in after the Umayyads, and they are actually going to move the capital from Damascus to Baghdad. Baghdad's a very old city. I always feel like I remember watching the news, of course, during the Iraq War, and Baghdad was always kind of at the center of a lot of issues and bombings even and things. And I just remember thinking, oh, please don't bomb like the ancient sites and and all of the historical sites. Please keep those intact. But anyways, Baghdad, of course, sat right in the middle of what used to be, the Sasanian Persian Empire. And so there were lots of incredibly diverse viewpoints on all kinds of things intellectually. And so under the Abbasid dynasty, you end up with the golden age of the Arab Empire. And when I say that, not only is it obviously prosperous economically at that point in time, it's reached its territorial height, but then it's reaching its economic potential and again, like prosperity heights under the Abbasid. But more importantly, because they were much more inclusive and they were not as discriminatory towards, non-Arab Muslims, you have kind of the explosion of, very progressive ideas, and you have this movement of, new innovations within medicine, math, science, literature, and so they have this place. It was called the House of Wisdom, that was in Baghdad, and it was obviously like a university, like a school kind of for scholars. And this was cool about the Abbasid dynasty. They would actually have not just Muslim scholars, but Jewish scholars and even Christian scholars come into the House of Wisdom, and they'd basically like put their brains together and work on new and exciting either innovations or theories about all kinds of things. And guys, at the height of the Arab Empire and the golden age, of the Arab Empire, Europe is experiencing the Dark Ages. And so a lot of your Greek and Roman texts and a lot of the, incredible philosophical works of, all of the awesome Greek minds and Roman minds are kept alive due to the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. And they would take all of those works and translate them out of either Latin or Greek, and they would translate them into Arabic. And again, like kind of keep them alive. And so when the European Renaissance starts in the 1300s, a lot of the incredible minds that we think of when we think of the European Renaissance, like Da Vinci, Michelangelo, all of these people that kind of bring back that Roman and Greek, not just art, but again, like philosophy, we've got Machiavelli and all of that comes along. They gather a large part of that foundational information from the Arab scholars in the House of Wisdom. So, the European Renaissance really would not have been near as successful, or may not have, some could argue, even happen without the golden age of the Arab Empire under the Abbasids. So, again, pretty important time frame. So again, Baghdad is the new capital. House of Wisdom is there. You do still have your caliphs, but you also have, a prime minister that's known as a vizier who advised the caliph. So again, this is kind of like his right-hand man. And despite as much prosperity as they experienced, especially under the leadership of the Caliph Harun al-Rashid, which is right there, right next to my head. Once he dies, unfortunately, his sons are kind of like bratty little entitled little brats. And they fight. They're two boys, they're two sons, and each think that they should rule. And they have a huge civil war and destroy a lot of the city. And just unfortunately, because of them, they ruin that golden age. And so the decline of the Abbasids is, as you can see in that box, due to civil war. Then caliphs abusing their power. We've talked about this before. A lot of times you can start to see the decline of an empire in their leadership. Their leadership gets weaker and weaker and weaker. You start to see uprisings and rebellions. And then, of course, because of the internal struggle, you start to see external attacks. It's like same story, different verse every single time an empire falls. I mean, there are very specific main things that start to happen. And so it's no different, unfortunately, with the Arab Empire and the end of the Abbasids. So who are the people that become the external threat once you start to see internal crumbling? It's the Seljuk Turks, which is kind of crazy because the Seljuks actually are the people who prospered as soldiers for the Abbasid Caliphate. So they actually were kind of like mercenary soldiers for the Caliphate at its height. But then as the Abbasid dynasty starts to weaken and the Seljuks are stronger, they realize like, hey, we could probably take this over. And that's exactly what happens. By, as it says, the 11th century, they take over the eastern provinces of the Abbasid Empire, aka the Arab Empire. And then by 1055, they're going to capture Baghdad. And so this is how you see the rise of the Turks that, of course, eventually become, the Ottoman Empire. So they're going to capture Jerusalem by 1071. And guys, 1095 is when the Pope Urban is going to call for the First Crusade. Okay. So no shocker there. I've said throughout this unit, like it's, you've got to understand the rise of the Arab Empire and what's viewed as the threat of Islam, of course, to the Holy Land, to understand why the response turns into the Crusades by the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. And I know we talked in the last unit about the schism, that created the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholic Church, but they will come together kind of during the Crusades to try to fight off, Islam in the Holy Land. So, but again, that's coming next week. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. So, anyways, let's look at their culture just for a second. obviously extensive trade through camel caravans. That just like every civilization is going to have a marketplace. Like for example, the Greeks, it was the agora. Well, the bazaar is the marketplace for basically every Muslim city or town. You can go to this day, the Istanbul's bazaar is the largest in the world. My mom's actually been to it. It's really pretty incredible, and it's huge. I mean, like it's everything that you could ever think of. I think is the way my mom put it. She said it's massive, but again, like it's the bazaar in Istanbul has operated, for hundreds of years now. And again, in most of these places in the Middle East, you can still find those, marketplaces operating, kind of in the same area. All right. Islamic society. Of course, according to the Quran, all Muslim people are equal in the eyes of God. But, human nature just doesn't operate that way. It would be nice if we could all live in this utopic, equal society. But as I've said before, that's just not reality. Human beings are always going to place themselves into those hierarchical pyramids. And the Arab Empire was no different. You had a very well defined upper class. Again, non Muslims were not treated equally. Slavery was widespread. Again, like that was all very normal at that time frame, not justifying it, but it was the historical norm of that era. And it will continue to be, obviously all the way up until the mid 1800s in most places. So, what is the role of women? This is always a big hot topic, of course, when you're talking about Islam and the Arab Empire. Well, I mean, in all reality, a lot of the customs that we think of today as Islamic are rooted in Arabic culture. Okay. Once Muhammad comes along, and of course, you see the spread religiously of Islam. That the religion of Islam doesn't take away the culture of the Arabs. And so and it's hard, I think, a lot of times for Westerners to not like to see the separation of those two things, because we have separation of church and state. Okay. They don't. They never have. You have to remember, Muhammad himself is not just a prophet and a religious leader, but he is a political leader and a military general, for goodness sake. So there's no separation there. And I think that's hard sometimes for us to wrap our mind around. But yes, are there women who are suppressed in the modern day? Are there horrific things going on? Absolutely. But there, the whole, a lot of times, head covering thing always comes up. The hijab, that's what those are called when they're covering their head. And there's all different kinds of versions of them. Some of them have their face completely visible. Others have just their eyes. Others have their entire their whole face covered. Some wear regular clothes but have the hijab on. Others wear, the entire outfit where nothing is shown. Some are allowed to wear colors, others aren't. And again, this just goes back to cultural differences. You have to understand, culturally, the Arab Empire spanned all the way out into what is modern day Pakistan, all the way over to the west to modern day Spain and Portugal. So, I mean, the cultural differences in these areas is pretty vast. And so, how they interpreted the Quran, how they interpreted the portion about, a woman's modesty and head coverings and those kind of things is going to naturally differ. So this is a good video that's kind of looks at the modern era, and again, like the Western viewpoint of it versus non-Western viewpoint of it, and it gives you kind of a good balance, in my opinion, of not all Arab women feel suppressed by wearing a hijab. Others do. And so once they become westernized, they refuse to wear it anymore. I think it's just a very personal journey. And a lot of students are like, well, yeah, but they shouldn't wear those, period. FYI, guys, Christian women wore head coverings for centuries. That's what bonnets were worn for. It's a symbol. It goes back all the way to the Old Testament. It's a symbol of your modesty as a woman. Okay. And again, it's talked about even in the Old Testament. So, it's today why Amish women wear bonnets. Catholic nuns, they cover their heads. If you look back at tons of portraits of royalty and of queens, um, uh, they have a head covering on. And again, this is a fundamental, like, Abrahamic religion thing. You know, Christians haven't held on to it as much because, again, it boils down to culture more than anything else. So again, like it's always a hot topic. This is a good video that you can watch to kind of give you some balanced information on it. But okay, philosophy, science, and history. I told you guys about the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, and again, the Golden Age, where they really truly propel the world forward in so many things. Paper at this point is coming out of China. And it's hitting Baghdad there along the Silk Road and the old Royal Road, which the Silk Road connects to. And so you've got libraries and so many different works of intellectual value, coming out of that region at the height of it. Arabs adopt the numerical system of India, including the use of zero. We still use the Arabic, form of numbers today. They create the astrolabe, which is huge for sailors later on, especially during the Age of Exploration. The Quran is clearly their greatest literary work. I've told you about the Hadith, that supplemental text. If you've noticed at all in the videos, anytime the Prophet Muhammad is shown, his face is, like whited out or non-existent. And it's because in Islamic beliefs, you are never supposed to show his face. You're not supposed to have any type of like iconography or idolatry towards the Prophet. They're very, very serious about this. You can actually look here. About a month ago, there was a French history teacher that was beheaded he created a debate in his history class over a political cartoon that showcased the face of Muhammad. And I think there were some very, very kind of conservative and radicalized Muslims living in that area of France that found out about this and I guess took great offense to him doing this in class. It was very obviously unfortunate. And you can Google that if you'd like. But I mean, they're very serious about, you will not show the face of Muhammad. So a lot of their art does not show faces. It's not human based. It's actually these arabesques, and it's like geometric patterns, and they're beautiful. But not your traditional like portraits or people in art that you're kind of used to seeing coming out of Europe. It's very different. Of course, as far as architecture goes, their mosques are gorgeous, and their most kind of long lasting architectural gifts to the world, so to speak. The Great Mosque of Samarra in Iraq is the largest. It was built, as it says, between 848 and 852, covers 10 acres. Its minaret, or its tower, is probably what makes it so famous, and you can see why. It's cool, swirls up, it's really big. And if you'll notice, around every Muslim mosque, there are towers, and it's because the muezzin is the person that goes up into those towers and does the call to prayer 5 times a day. Well, before you had the call to prayer streaming out over the radio and huge speakers, that he could and then using a microphone to do the call of prayer, and it amplifies obviously his voice. Well, the best way to amplify your voice was to get up high, and so your voice would carry. And so that is the reason why all of these mosques have these towers. Again, before all of the new fancy modern technology and things like that, the muezzin would go up and his voice would carry further for the call to prayer. So this is a quick video over just the Golden Age. It's 3 or 4 minutes, and she's just kind of doing a good little synopsis of some of their major things. And that's about it. I also challenge you to go and listen to a recording of the call to prayer. I don't know, like I don't mean in this to be insensitive. I mean this like kind of in a cool way. It's almost haunting when you listen to it. It's very like it's an interesting thing to listen to. Widen your horizons a little bit and Google it and check it out. So that is it. That's the end of Unit 4. And again, y'all will take your test on Friday, and stay safe out there. COVID cases are rising. Wear your masks, wash your hands regularly, and we'll see you guys next week for the Crusades. Bye, everybody.